This is number 32 in our Chapter 6 review on page 342, where we are asked to solve this quadratic equation by completing the square. This one's a little tricky because the number in front of the x, which we know is our b, is an odd number. And we know to complete the square, what we do is we divide b by 2 and we square it. And then we make sure that we add that to both sides. But we must start by moving this constant to the other side. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides of my equal sign so that I then have the x's together on one side and the constants on the other side. So now if I take b and I divide it by 2, that's a decimal, so I'm just going to leave it as a fraction 5/2. When I square a fraction, I can square the top and I can square the bottom. So 5 squared is 25 and 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to add 25/4 to both sides of my equal sign. Now, this is a perfect square trinomial on the left side of the equal sign. It's going to factor down to a binomial squared. And to add 2 to 25, you have to think of 2 as being 2 over 1, and you've got to have common denominators to be able to add fractions. So I need a common denominator of 4, so I'm going to multiply the top and bottom of that fraction by 4. And that's going to give me 8/4 plus 25/4, which is 33/4. My trinomial, my perfect square trinomial, factors down to a binomial squared. We learned that we just have to take the square root of the first term to get the first term in the binomial, and take the square root of the last term to get the last term in the binomial, and then bring down the sign of the middle term. So we get x minus 5/2 quantity squared is equal to 33/4. So now we have to get rid of that squaring, and to do so, we square root both sides. But we want to remember that every positive number, has a positive and negative square root. So on the left, the square rooting of that quantity squared, those cancel one another out. And on the right, I have positive and negative square root of 33 over square root of 4, which is 2. So when you square root a fraction, you just square root what's on top and you square root what's on bottom. And then finally, the last thing we have to do is just to get the x alone, add 5/2 to both sides. And we'll have, for our final answer, x is equal to 5/2 plus the square root of 33 over 2 and minus the square root of 33 over 2. And that's your answer. That radical cannot be simplified.